is the Rosetta Stone. It was the key to understanding Egyptian hieroglyphics, and it is one of the most precious and valuable treasures of the British Museum.
For more than 2 centuries, the Rosetta Stone has been celebrated as the key that unlocked the forgotten tongue of the pharaohs. Generations of scholars believed its secrets had long been exhausted, its carved surface studied to the very last detail. But they were wrong. When cutting-edge AI scanned the stone, reaching deeper than the human eye could ever hope to see, something unexpected began to stir. What emerged was not a correction of history, but a revelation cloaked in shadows, a whisper carried across time, one that forces even the most certain voices of history to fall silent. And as we uncover what lies hidden within this ancient relic, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the truths still waiting to be revealed. The Rosetta Stone. To some, just an ancient slab. To others, a threshold between worlds. When first lifted from the sands near Rosetta and handed to the British in 1801, it was described simply a black stone carved with 3 inscriptions. The simplicity of that description masked centuries of misunderstanding. In London, curious eyes crowded around it. To make the inscriptions clearer, chalk was pressed into its grooves, each letter glowing white against the dark. To shield it from the touch of endless hands, a coat of carnauba wax was brushed across its face. The wax deepened the color until the stone looked almost jet black. For generations, scholars believed it was basalt. But in 1999, when that chalk and wax were stripped away, the stone finally revealed its true self. A surface of dark gray, flecked with crystalline light. And there, cutting across its corner, a faint pink vein, a scar in the stone's skin, a sign of its true origin. Geologists traced the vein to Gebel Tingar, a quarry on the Nile near Aswan. That scar was proof. The stone was not black basalt, but granodiorite, pulled from the earth where countless other monuments of Egypt had been born. Yet the Rosetta Stone is more than geology. It is presence. A weight of 760 kilograms. A block 3 feet 8 inches tall, more than 2 feet wide, heavy enough to break bones if it fell, yet delicate enough to carry a world of meaning in its carved lines. Imagine the struggle of moving it across desert sands, across ships, across seas. But the true power lies in its voice. 3 scripts carved into its polished face. At the top, hieroglyphs, already ancient when they were etched, chosen for sacred permanence. Beneath, Demotic, the language of daily life, quick and alive like flowing water. At the base, Greek, the voice of rulers, law, and empire. 1 decree, 3 tongues, a message intended for all. And yet, what we hold is incomplete. The stone today is a fragment. The hieroglyphs at the top are shattered, leaving only their last lines. The Demotic survives more fully, 32 lines still whispering across the centuries. The Greek remains strongest. Yet even here, the words fade into silence, where the stone breaks away. By comparing it with others, like the Canopus Decree, scholars imagine the Rosetta Stone once stood taller, crowned with sacred images, kings presented to gods, a winged disk of protection blazing above them. Today, only absence remains. This stone is not merely a relic. It is a threshold, a storm of voices pressed into rock, a mirror reflecting both power and fragility. For centuries, it seemed to have given all its secrets, but now, with new eyes scanning deeper than ever before, it speaks again. And its new voice is not just one of language, it is one of warning, a reminder that history is never finished, that shadows linger where light dares to shine, and that sometimes the truths we uncover carry more weight than we are prepared to bear. The Rosetta Stone does not only tell us about Egypt, it tells us about ourselves, that we are always staring at fragments, grasping at whispers, haunted by the silence of what has been lost. Beneath the silence of shifting sands, a monument of power was raised. Not a temple, not a statue, but a slab of stone, carrying words that bound a kingdom together in its hour of greatest weakness. It was the year 196 BC. Egypt was no longer the golden empire of the pharaohs. Instead, it was a fractured land under the rule of a boy who had inherited not stability, but chaos. Ptolemy V, Epiphanes, only 12 years of age, carried the crown of his ancestors, yet the crown itself seemed heavier than his young shoulders could bear. The priests of Memphis gathered to raise him beyond mortality, declaring him a divine figure through a decree carved into stone. This was not the triumphant roar of a pharaoh, it was the whisper of survival, spoken in the language of gods and men alike. But this decree carried mysteries of its own. In its lines, the date itself seemed to shift like shadows in torchlight. The Greek and hieroglyphic versions spoke of November 197 BC, while the Demotic text hinted at March 196 BC. Why would a single event fracture into three truths? Was it mistake, politics, or something more deliberate? An attempt to bind different calendars, different worlds, into one fragile narrative? Even now, scholars can only guess. What remains certain is that the decree marked an attempt to hold together a kingdom on the brink. The story of this decree is not a tale of prosperity, but of turbulence. Ptolemy V was the son of Ptolemy IV and his sister wife Arsinoe, whose lives were cut short in a storm of conspiracy. At the heart of that plot stood Agathoclea, mistress of the king, who seized control in the boy's name after their deaths. But stolen crowns rarely rest easy. The people of Alexandria, inflamed with rage, dragged Agathoclea and her family into the streets, where their downfall was as brutal as their rise. Blood stained the city, and from its fury emerged new guardians for the child king. Tlepolemus rose first, only to be replaced by Aristomenes. Each man claimed to shield the throne, but each fell in turn, their power as fragile as the empire they ruled. Beyond Egypt's borders, the storm grew darker still. To the east, Antiochus III, king of the Seleucid Empire, struck a devastating blow at the Battle of Panium, seizing Syria, a region that included Judea. To the north and west, Philip V of Macedon carved away at Ptolemaic lands, capturing cities and islands that had once secured Egypt's dominance. And even within the Nile itself, rebellion refused to die. Horvenifer, then Ankhwenifer, rose in defiance, leading uprisings that scorched the south for years. Egypt was a kingdom hemmed in by enemies and hollowed out by unrest. It was in this crucible of danger that the boy king was crowned at Memphis. Why not Alexandria, the Greek jewel of the Ptolemies? Because Alexandria was a city of politics, of Greek settlers and foreign tongues. Memphis was older, sacred, Egyptian. It was here that the priests still held the heartbeat of tradition, where gods and kings intertwined in rituals older than empire itself. By crowning Ptolemy in Memphis, the dynasty sought not only legitimacy, but the loyalty of Egypt's soul. And so, the decree was born, carrying promises etched into eternity. The priests praised Ptolemy's generosity. They told of silver and grain gifted to temples, of Nile waters tamed when they rose too high, of fields saved from ruin through his command. They vowed loyalty in return. They would honor him alongside the gods, celebrate his birthday, and remember his coronation as festival. His image would not fade into obscurity, for it would live in stone across the temples of Egypt. But what made this decree extraordinary was not its content, but its form. It was written not once, but 3 times. In hieroglyphs, the script of gods. In Demotic, the script of daily life. And in Greek, the script of rulers and empire. 3 languages, 1 message. The crown of Egypt, though shaken, still endured. Yet behind the ritual words lay strategy. This was no mere hymn to a king. It was a pact, a fragile truce between crown and priesthood, each dependent on the other for survival. The priests, guardians of tradition, recognized the boy as divine, lending him their authority. The crown, in turn, acknowledged the power of temples, weaving Egyptian identity into Greek rule. Unlike the pharaohs of old, who declared themselves gods directly, Ptolemy's voice was borrowed, channeled through the priesthood. It was a sign of a dynasty that could no longer command unquestioned reverence. It needed negotiation, compromise, and performance. The decree, therefore, was more than politics. It was a threshold between worlds, a slab of stone where 3 languages met, where 3 audiences were addressed at once. It bound Greeks to Egyptians, gods to mortals, past to future. And yet, even with its certainty carved into rock, it carried within it riddles that would echo across time. For centuries, the stone waited, its voice silenced beneath the soil, its secrets locked away. When it emerged again, it would not only speak of Ptolemy, it would unlock the very language of the pharaohs. Scholars across centuries would wrestle with its words. Early translations by Budge and Bevan offered glimpses but left shadows untouched. Later work, such as that of Simpson, Quirk, and Andrews, peeled back deeper meanings, yet still the stone resisted full surrender. Every translation revealed a fragment of truth, but never the whole. The decree remained what it had always been, layered, complex, refusing to give itself entirely. And so we are left with questions. What does it mean that a decree meant to secure power in a fractured Egypt became the key to deciphering the ancient tongue? Was it chance or destiny that such a stone survived, carrying 3 languages side by side until modern eyes could rediscover them? Was it merely politics or something larger, an unseen design whispering across time? But how did the Rosetta Stone enter British hands? When Napoleon Bonaparte led his armies into Egypt in 1798, he did not march with soldiers alone. He carried with him an army of scholars, 151 men of science, art, and history, known as the Commission des Sciences et des Arts. Their mission was more than conquest. They came to measure, to record, to uncover the hidden wonders of the Nile. While muskets fired and cannons roared, these men searched for fragments of lost civilizations, hoping to bring their discoveries back to Europe as trophies of knowledge. It was in the summer of 1799, in the shadow of war, that fortune revealed itself. Near the port city of Rosetta, today's Rashid, French soldiers under Colonel Daupoul labored on the crumbling defenses of Fort Julien. Stones tumbled, dust rose, and in the rubble, Lieutenant Pierre-François Bouchard noticed something strange. A dark slab, its surface carved with 3 bands of inscription. To the untrained eye, it was nothing more than broken masonry. But Bouchard sensed otherwise. He brought it to his commander, and the discovery was swiftly reported to General Minot. In their hands lay not just a stone, but a mystery that would one day unlock the lost voice of the pharaohs. The slab was sent to Cairo, to the Institut d'Egypte, the new temple of learning Napoleon had founded. There, scholars examined it closely. Michel-Ange Lancret, recognized its strange power. He noted 3 texts, hieroglyphic at the top, Greek at the bottom, and in the middle, a script unfamiliar to most Europeans. Some thought it Syriac, but Jean-Joseph Marcel, a linguist of rare insight, identified it correctly as Demotic, the everyday writing of the Egyptians. The scholars realized the miracle before them. The same decree carved in 3 tongues, a bridge across languages. If Greek could be read, might not the hieroglyphs, long silent, finally be understood? Word spread quickly. In September 1799, the French expedition's newspaper announced the discovery. Soon, copies of the inscriptions were made, pressed directly from the stone itself. Nicolas Jacques Conté, an artist and inventor, devised a way to use the slab like a printing block, inking its carved letters so impressions could be sent abroad. General Dugois carried these images back to Paris, where Europe's greatest minds pored over the strange signs with fevered excitement. But history does not grant discoveries without contest. In 1701, British forces landed at Aboukir Bay. The French, still clinging to Egypt, withdrew with their treasures, maps, drawings, artifacts, and the mysterious stone, retreating north to Alexandria. The city was besieged. Cut off, outnumbered, the French had no choice. On August 30th, they surrendered, and then began a struggle, not of muskets, but of ownership. General John Hely Hutchinson, commanding the British, demanded the spoils of discovery. The Rosetta Stone, Menou argued, was private property belonging to the Institut d'Egypte. He would not yield it. Some French scholars even threatened to destroy their work rather than surrender, evoking the memory of the Library of Alexandria, lost to flames centuries earlier. But the British would not bend. Scholars Edward Daniel Clarke and William Hamilton inspected the French collections and exposed what was hidden. The treasures, they declared, were greater than admitted. Menou's resistance crumbled. How exactly the stone passed hands is cloaked in conflicting stories. Colonel Tompkins Hillgrove Turner claimed he seized it himself, hauling it away on a gun carriage. Clarke told another tale that a French officer secretly guided him through back alleys, revealing the stone concealed among Menou's baggage, fearful it would vanish in the chaos. However it happened, the outcome was the same. The Rosetta Stone, torn from Egypt and pried from French hands, was claimed as a prize of the British crown. In 1702, Turner sailed with the stone aboard the captured French frigate HMS Egyptienne. It reached Portsmouth in February, where orders from King George III placed it not in royal palaces, but in the British Museum, a gift to the empire and the world. Before its final homecoming, Turner presented it to the Society of Antiquaries, where scholars marveled over its inscriptions. On March 11th, 1802, the Rosetta Stone stood before them, no longer buried in a ruined fort, but unveiled as the key to history. What began as rubble in the walls of Fort Julien became the most important artifact of its time. The journey of the Rosetta Stone was shaped by war, rivalry, and ambition. From French discovery to British claim, from the Nile Delta to the halls of London, the stone's path was as contested as the empire it once sought to protect. And yet, its true power was not in who possessed it, but in what it would one day reveal. For more than 1,000 years, the voices of ancient Egypt had been silenced. The walls of temples, the soaring obelisks, and the hidden tombs still carried their words, carved in elegant rows of hieroglyphs. But to later generations, these were not words at all. They were strange and beautiful pictures, a language whose key had been lost to time. What the pharaohs had once spoken and their scribes had once carefully inscribed had become a puzzle with no solution, a script that looked more like art than speech. The decline had been gradual. After Egypt fell under Roman control, fewer and fewer people could read the ancient scripts. Hieroglyphs, once the proud symbols of kingship and religion, were already limited to priests and temple scribes. By the 4th century AD, they had faded almost completely from daily use. The spread of Christianity only accelerated their disappearance. Temples were closed, rituals ceased, and with them, the sacred art of reading hieroglyphs vanished. The very last hieroglyphic inscription that we know of, the graffito of Esmet Akom at Philae, was carved in the year 394 AD. Soon after, even the more practical Demotic script fell silent. The Egyptian language itself lived on only in the liturgy of the Coptic Church, while its oldest written forms became a mystery. For centuries, scholars could do little more than wonder. To Greek and Roman eyes, the writing looked symbolic, perhaps even mystical, more about secret meanings than actual sounds. That belief endured. In the 5th century, the priest Horapollo wrote a book called Hieroglyphica, describing nearly 200 signs. Generations accepted his interpretations as fact, but he was largely mistaken. Instead of offering clarity, his book spread falsehoods that misled scholars for centuries. In the medieval Islamic world, however, interest in the ancient writing did not die. Arab scholars like Dulnun al-Misri and Ibn Wahshiyya compared hieroglyphs to the Coptic still in use in their time. They suspected some connection, though they could not yet prove it. In Europe, too, curiosity flickered. Renaissance thinkers such as Pierius Valerianus and later Athanasius Kircher in the 17th century devoted years to the problem. Kircher famously called it the riddle of the Sphinx. But though his imagination was vast, his answers were wrong. The code remained unbroken. Everything shifted in 1799 with a chance discovery in Egypt, the Rosetta Stone. This slab, carved with a decree in 3 scripts, Greek, Demotic, and hieroglyphs, offered scholars a unique key. For the first time, they could compare the known Greek with the mysterious Egyptian texts. It was a bridge across centuries. Even so, progress was painfully slow. In Paris, Cambridge, and Göttingen, scholars wrestled with the Greek text first, producing partial and often flawed translations. Attention soon turned to the middle script, Demotic. Swedish diplomat Johann David Åkerblad, working with the French Orientalist Antoine Isaac Sylvestre de Sacy, tried to match names across the Demotic and Greek versions. Their efforts bore fruit, identifying names like Ptolemy, Arsinoe, and Alexandria, and even sketching an alphabet. But they soon struck a wall. Demotic was not purely phonetic, and without realizing this, they could go no further. Yet these small steps mattered. They revealed that the ancient language was not an impenetrable riddle after all, but a code that could be unlocked with patience and persistence. For the first time in centuries, hope flickered that the lost voice of Egypt might one day be heard again. It would take decades more and the brilliance of Jean-François Champollion to finally open the door. But the Rosetta Stone had given humanity the first real key. The road to unlocking Egypt's lost language was long and uncertain, but at last the pieces began to fall into place. Even those who stepped away from the problem left behind sparks that kept the search alive. Sylvestre de Sacy, one of the most respected Orientalists of his time, had made early progress with the Demotic script on the Rosetta Stone, but eventually abandoned direct study. Yet his influence lingered. In 1811, While speaking with a Chinese student about the nature of Chinese characters, he recalled an earlier idea that had been circulating for decades. Perhaps not every hieroglyph was purely symbolic. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and be sure to click on the next video appearing on your screen for more fascinating history.